everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Bunny Operator here. A little bit of change of pace, steering slightly away from firearms related or specific information. We're going to go ahead and dive into other areas of information that myself or other folks, such as my guests, have areas of expertise in. On August 22nd, 2001, I was invited by the Asian Pacific American Gun Owners Association to help them with their new shooter event, and subsequently also provide a presentation on hate crimes. So I wanted to present an understanding and reporting public education presentation on hate crime to hopefully help persons out there, everyday citizens, understand the definitions and how to properly report hate crimes. Now, I want to preface this by stating that because the location and nature of the presentation or the demographic, that this specific presentation that I'm presenting is California-centric and Asian-centric. But a lot of the information within is national, and the data within the presentation can be adapted using your own state's local statutes, as well as the federal statistical information can be searched and adapted using whatever demographic you want to go for. So what you're going to see is the actual PowerPoint presentation that I used for the APAGOA event. And we're going to go and get started. You can see from the initial screen here that it is a PowerPoint presentation based on the understanding and reporting of hate crimes. So first, we're going to start off with the definition. What is a hate crime? So on the federal side, Title 18 U.S.C. 249, also known as the Hate Crimes Act, defines a hate crime as a criminal offense which is motivated in whole or in part by the offender's bias or biases against a race, religion, disability, whether it be mental or physical, sexual orientation, ethnicity, nationality, national origin, gender, gender identity. The offender's perception of the victim is enough to satisfy a hate crime, even if the victim does not have the perceived characteristic. What does that mean? It means that the suspect can perceive the victim to have whatever orientation or whatever race or characteristic that they think the victim has, and that's sufficient to satisfy. It doesn't matter if the victim actually matches the characteristic or not. Certain forms of human trafficking, slavery, and domestic violence incidents can be classified as hate crimes. So usually in this case, the hate crime nature of it or the charge is an enhancement to the already existing crime that's in place. So remember, part of the definition was a criminal offense. So it has to be a crime already in progress, and then the hate crime charge is added in addition to it. So what I mean by certain types of the human trafficking, slavery, DV, and all that stuff, well, human trafficking, especially if they target a specific demographic. Let's say there are human trafficking organizations that specifically target young women. And in some cases, human trafficking incidents or crimes where they're targeting young boys. Moving on to the California specific definition. Again, you can go to your local statutes or your state's constitution and look up the relevant statute for your state and apply to this presentation for your locale. So California Penal Code 422.55 states that a hate crime means a criminal act committed in whole or in part because of one or more of the following actual or perceived characteristics of the victim. So this is the actual definition from the California Constitution. So you can see it's kind of mirroring the federal side, but they're being a little bit more specific in the definitions. So disability, gender, nationality, race or ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation. The addition is that subsection 7, they've also added and codified association with a person or a group with one of the more of these actual or perceived characteristics also qualifies as a hate crime, meaning that your mere association with a specific demographic, if the crime occurs to you, if you were the victim of a crime because the suspect attacked you for associating with persons of certain demographics or in these protected characteristics, then it's still constituted as a hate crime. So we see this with a lot that's going on in the world right now. Like we'll see people supporting certain racial demographics. In current examples, we have the BLM movements, we have Black persons supporting the BLM movement. And in some cases, we have the radicalized opposition that attack those other nationalities or races that are supporting BLM. So that can be constituted as a hate crime. Or in the other aspect, when we have women who support men's rights movements, and then you have other radicalized extreme sides of the pro-female side, pro-women's movement, and the anti-male movement, and they attack these women for supporting men's rights. So that can be constituted as a hate crime as well. The most common charges, or at least as far as California goes, but this matches the federal definition as well, or the federal statistics. The most common types of charges are basically by force, either by threat or by physical harm, or in property crimes. So that's basically it, crimes against persons or property crimes. For the California definition, it's the enhancement charges are 422.6A for threat or physical harm, and then 422.6B for property damage. So again, these are all hate crime specific. And there are other, at least in the California Constitution, there are many other hate crimes charges that are specific to certain situations, such as specifically targeting religious organizations and different statutes for that. But just understand that these two are the main ones that typically pop up. This screen is actually from the California Department of Justice's website. So if you take a look at that, it's basically everything that I've mentioned. So I'll give you a little bit moment to read this over. And the bottom, you'll notice that additional information can be found on the Office of Attorney General's website. So the most common types of hate crimes, property crimes is the most common because it's usually the most petty, if you will. So PC 422.6. So this includes vandalism, destruction, damage of property, theft, burglary, arson, anything that's not associated with an actual person or at least direct contact with a person. So this includes private property, government property, public property. The second most common type is crimes against persons. Again, Penal Code 422.6, Section A. So this includes threats, intimidation, harassing letters, messages, emails, calls, electronic messages, physical letters, all that stuff. So if you have children or even yourselves that use social media, you get repeatedly continuous harassing and threatening messages through social media channels such as, IG, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, or whatever it is that's being used today. Those can be traced back if they are substantial and you report it and the agency is doing their due diligence. They will submit warrants for traces or submit requests from these providers, these ISPs or these program providers, and work with the local law enforcement agency of the originating message in order to potentially track down the person that's doing this. Sometimes it's people that's trolling, but sometimes they're legitimate threats from people that may or may not know the victim. The standard assault and battery, for those of you in different states, assault and battery are two separate things for the California definition. On the federal definition, assault and battery are the same thing. There's no such thing as attempted assault on the federal definition. It has to be completed. In the California definition, assault is generally accepted as the attempted battery. Battery is physical contact. Assault is the attempt of battery. So if you swing and miss, it's an assault. And then if you swing and you hit, then it's battery. Assault with a deadly weapon, ADW, that's not just with the weapon, but it can also be with force likely to produce great bodily injury. What does GBI mean, great bodily injury? It can usually mean laceration that's severe, loss of consciousness, hitting your head so hard that you get a concussion, anything that requires essentially medical attention other than like general scrapes or bruises. This is where it can get kind of confusing between the California and the federal side. California, for the most part, considers ADW if it has a credible threat behind it. So basically, if somebody's just holding a baseball bat and quote unquote brandishing it, California may not consider that ADW, but the federal side will, because the federal definition of ADW accepts the presentation of a weapon. So it accepts the mere presence used in a threatening manner as ADW. So you can see how there's a variation between the two reporting sections. But understand that for the California side, the way that my section does is when we come across a report that shows that a weapon was in use, even though the actual California or the local charge does not include 245 PC, or in this case, assault with a deadly weapon, that's okay because we still see the fact that a weapon was used in a threatening manner. So that will be reported to the FBI accordingly. Robbery is basically, it's from the property crime section, it is theft, but against a person directly and using either force or threat of force or fear. Suspect comes up to you and says, give me your money. And then they're like grasping their fists and they're posturing like they're going to attack you. You know, that's sufficient for robbery because they're using the threat of force and then fear to rob you essentially, or to deprive you of your property. Rape and murder, two of the most quintessential mala and se versus mala prohibited crimes out there. Like if you're not familiar with those two Latin terms, anything that legislation passes and it's like silly things like infractions or general misdemeanors that are considered as quote unquote victimless crimes, like a speeding ticket or so, those are mala prohibita. It simply means because we said so, basically. Mala and se are inherently evil crimes. Usually that associates with crimes against persons, such as violating somebody else's civil right to safety, in this case, battery, ADW, robbery, rape, murder. So why does this all matter? Why am I bringing this up to you? So again, I want to remind you all that this is California-centric and Asian demographic-centric, considering that I was presenting this for an Asian-centric group. But these statistics I'll be showing you does capture other demographics. And if you wish to utilize this for yourself, go to the links that I've provided in this presentation and research the demographics that you want to use. And note that I'm using official government statistics here. And I'll give an explanation of what is entailed or what is contained within those statistics. So why does it matter? Well, the California Department of Justice released a special anti-Asian bias hate crimes report on June 30th of 2021, and it contains all 2020 hate crimes reported, or AKA known to law enforcement. So these are only official police reports. In the summary section of that report, it showed a 107% increase in total anti-Asian hate crimes compared to 2019. A 107% increase. That sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Especially when considering throughout all of 2020 was the rise of the anti-Asian hate crimes, if you will, because of COVID-19 and the spread of political propaganda and a lot of what the news media is saying, as well as reports on social media. But in order for you to do this correctly, in order for you to spark a change, you have to understand how hate crimes work and how the data is presented, and as well as how the government works. I suppose that's part of the mission of what I'm doing here, is attempting to provide information for the public to utilize and work within the parameters of how the government works. In order for us as an entire community and as entire people to basically get things done, like really get things done other than being physically present, is to work within the system and then use the system's rules to our advantage. So 107% increase, but the actual numbers were 43 in 2019 compared to 89 in 2020. From a pure number standpoint, 43 to 89, it doesn't sound like a lot considering that the Asian population in the state of California is a considerable amount. According to the US Census from July 1st of 2019 statistics, California's population was 39,512,223. So almost 40 million people in the state of California as of July 1st, 2019. And approximately 15.5% of that was Asian, Asian only, basically without a mixed variation. So the 15.5% out of the nearly 40 million people, that's approximately 4.5 million persons in the state of California are Asian. So out of that 4.5 million, does this 43 and 89 seem like a lot? No, it's absolutely not. That is minuscule. It's not even a 0.01%. Based on this report and based on the hype that the media and channels on social media have presented as far as 2020 and 2021, this is insignificant and does not match the hype that is occurring. Granted, nobody should have to go through this. Nobody should be victims of hate crime. And I understand that, but we're talking about statistically speaking. We're going to continue on here. And just remember those statistics that I gave you. 89 out of 4.5 million. The most common reported anti-Asian hate crime between 2016 and 2020. So the Department of Justice also gave you a compiled data sheet of 5 years worth. So the most common reported anti-Asian hate crime is violent crime, which means crimes against persons. It showed an increase of 127% from 2016 to 2020. So again, sounds like a lot until you look at the actual numbers. The actual numbers were between 32 and 72. So property crime increased by 55% from 2016 to 2020. The actual numbers were 11 to 17. So you remember I stated the most common types of hate crimes are property crimes. In the California demographic, or at least based on the statistics reported, most of them are crimes against persons, and 11 to 17 between 2016 and 2020 were property crimes. The most common type of property crime was property damage, graffiti, vandalism, destruction of property. Anti-Asian hate crimes mostly targeted individuals between that 5-year span. Most of the victims were adults. They were over the age of 18. 101 persons were targeted in 2020 alone. That's multiple victims per individual incident were included in this data. So not just a single victim and single attack, but sometimes the suspect attacked multiple individuals in a group setting or maybe within the span of the same incident. There's a 102% increase since 2019 to 2020. That's 50 people in 2019. And here is a screenshot from the actual report that that was released by the California Department of Justice. So you take a look at the information presented. These are the total number of persons victimized. There is a fluctuation, but from a statistical numbers standpoint, it's still pretty low considering the 4.5 million Asians in the state of California, according to that US Census data. And here are the federal statistics for you. This is from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, aka the FBI, their Universal Crime Report, or UCR. And these are the national statistics that are basically reported by all participating law enforcement agencies in the United States. And again, this is what is known and officially reported to law enforcement, okay? Note that the FBI, as of the date of this video, they have received the 2020 data, but it's not been published yet. So my guess is it takes them a little bit of time to compile and submit a report. So in 2018, so you can see there is a link here to the 2018 data that you can go look up for yourself, as well as not only the summary report, but also the tables if you want to look at individual data and demographics, including who the suspects were, demographic of the suspects to the victims. So you can see that. Okay, so approximately 16,000 law enforcement agencies participated. There were approximately 7,000 single bias hate crimes reported. That means the victim contained one demographic that was reported in the hate crime. So it's not like sometimes being like anti-white and anti-gay, single bias demographic. And out of those 7,000 cases, 57.5% were motivated by race, ethnicity, and ancestry. So anything associated with the way you look, where you're from, the color of your skin, if you will. And 84 were multiple bias incidents that I mentioned earlier. So example, somebody was like the crime contained an anti-male and anti-Asian bias in a single incident. So, multiple bias incident, if you will. So that 57.5% essentially is approximately 5,000 hate crimes were submitted as single bias and race and ancestry based. Approximately 4.9% were anti-Black, 20.2% were anti-white, 13% was anti-Hispanic, 3.5% was anti-Asian and bias. And from looking into the tables, again, if you go here, you go to the website and you look at the actual tables, you'll see that 3.5% represents 148 incidents according to the data tables. So 3.5% out of this total number seems like a lot until you actually look at the tables and you consider the actual number of incidents that occurred. So 148 on a national level were crimes against Asians based on race. And of course, there are other demographics noted. Again, you go to the FBI UCR's website to gather that information for yourself, as well as looking to other demographic information and other statistics, okay? But I'm using these as a baseline example for you to reference. Okay, here's the 2019 statistics. So in 2019, approximately nearly 16,000, a little bit less, participated in 2019. Out of that, about the same, about 7,000 were single bias hate crimes. Almost half of that was motivated by race, ethnicity, ancestry bias. 211 cases were multiple bias incidents. And very similarly, close to 5,000 hate crimes were single bias against race, ethnicity, ancestry. So these statistics haven't changed that much. You look at 2018, 2019, approximately 46 to 48% here. So there was a slight increase. A decrease in anti-white bias, a very slight increase in anti-Hispanic, and an increase in anti-Asian bias between 2018 and 2019. So 3.5 to 4.3%. But we're looking at 148% incidents noted versus 158 incidents noted between the 2 years. So 10 additional hate crimes on a national level. See, it doesn't sound like a lot once you look at the actual numbers, does it? Again, these are official FBI statistics, so you can go and verify this for yourself. It doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, the variation between the 2 years, as well as from a total national level. We're talking about the 4.5 million Asians in the state of California already, and there was only less than 100 cases, as well as this on a national level. On a national level, 158 incidents reported in 2019. Now, I'm anxious to see the 2020 data, see how much of an increase or if there is much of a change at all. But just from that standpoint, on a national level, it doesn't look like a lot. But again, this is not to downplay the anti-Asian bias crimes that are going on as of the last year and a half or 2 years or so, but it's simply to give you the hard data to reference, okay? And there is a reasoning behind this, okay? And we will get to that as the presentation goes on. And of course, this applies to any other demographic that you want if you want to convert this presentation to something you can use for your local level. But I will urge you all to use official government statistics because there is a standard. If you use a private organization or a school-sponsored type of report or quote-unquote peer-reviewed, if you will, if we can't agree on which statistics, official statistics to use and to reference, then of course there's always going to be counter arguments to each other's arguments. And that's just simply because the data you're using is not reported correctly, or the data can be skewed. And the example I used during the actual APAGOA presentation was look at the term average. Whenever an organization or whoever decides to use the term average, the subsequent question should always be which average, because any of you that have any basic or rudimentary understanding of math, there are 3 types of averages. There's mean, medium, and mode, and each of them, the numbers can be skewed greatly depending on which one you use. So understanding the statistical information and having an agreed set on official set of statistics will hopefully help to prevent a lot of the arguments because we're all on the same baseline understanding, but we have to have that standard. So what we have is a scenario of victims are not reporting to law enforcement. Or it could just be the statistics are representative of exactly what's going on. I don't believe that, though. I don't think that's the case. I think it's more likely that victims are not reporting to law enforcement, and simply because there is another set of government statistics that's out there. People are self-reporting that they're victims of crime, and it doesn't match what's officially known to law enforcement. And we've all seen even in Hollywood they portray this, but we all know that the term snitches get stitches, and that is representative of what's going on out there. There is a large demographic of persons out there that don't want to cooperate with law enforcement. And that's just kind of the nature of the world. But this is known as the dark matter of crime. It is the crimes that are unknown to the government or to law enforcement. The National Crime Victim Survey, or NCVS, is what I was mentioning. It is handled by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, or BJS, under the U.S. Department of Justice, or US DOJ. If you're not familiar, the FBI is also under the U.S. Department of Justice, and US DOJ is the all-encompassing government organization that has all these sub-agencies underneath. The FBI, DEA, U.S. Marshal Service, ATF is all under the U.S. Department of Justice, as well as some other organizations. The NCVS, one of the problems with it is that they don't consistently have data for us to review. The last publication was in June of 2017, and it contains 2004 to 2015 data. So it's not close to representing what I'm talking about today, which is current times. And another issue with the NCVS is that it is self-reported. Being a survey, the BJS, they send a survey out to basically the United States, kind of like the Census Bureau. They send that survey out, and then whoever decides to participate reports accordingly. So the caveat is that when they self-report, it can be unverified. So meaning it may be a case that's not an actual true crime, or in this case, because we're talking about hate crimes, it may not be an actual true hate crime, but the victim thinks they were, so they self-report it as a hate crime. So, but the NCVS, in comparison to the UCR, it does show you there's a variance, and sometimes a very large variance of data. So that's where we get the quote unquote the dark matter of crime that you see. So this helps to prove what I suspected, that victims are not reporting to law enforcement versus the numbers in the UCR actually representing what's going on. Victims of hate crimes often do not report their victimization to local law enforcement agencies, and this results in an underreporting of hate crimes, or any other crime for that matter. So this can be due to cultural barriers, depending on, it doesn't even have to be a foreign culture or quote unquote non-traditional American culture. It can just be general cultural barriers, like a regional where you grew up. You know, some areas just don't trust law enforcement just because of their historical experiences with them. Be a good Asian. It's like we've all heard this, or at least in the Asian community, you know, the be a good Asian. I don't want to get any trouble. Stay out of trouble. You know, I don't want to get involved with law enforcement. I just want to be left alone. Nothing will happen anyways, so I'm not going to bother reporting. Language barriers are also an issue. So, you know, that could be kind of a given. It can just be you just don't quite understand, or you don't understand enough to make an informed decision. Don't understand how to report. Don't understand hate crimes. Don't understand how the criminal justice system or even America works. Don't understand your rights. So that can be a huge factor. Lack of public education on this information. A lack of community involvement or willingness to report. So this comes along with the lethargic response from the community. You know, a lot of these cultures are very collective, meaning they will do what their peers do. And if their peers aren't reporting, they don't want to be the outcast and they don't want to report. So the result is the Asian community, as well as other communities, are underrepresented in this specific topic for hate crimes itself. I mean, we saw the statistical numbers earlier. So understand that the government does not and will not respond with additional resources to combat these incidents, to combat, in this case, hate crimes, without verifiable data to support the need for the resources. This is why what I'm doing here, what I'm trying to educate on, is so important. If there is a legitimate increase in anti-Asian bias hate crimes, or just crimes against Asians in general, it's not reflected in the official government statistics. The data does not support the cries for assistance. Okay, so how do we remedy this? How do we get the government, as well as ourselves and our community, to help combat all of this, to provide resources? Well, for cultural barriers, you can help educate your own community, your friends, your family, your peers, on all this, on everything that I presented. Okay, you can show them this video. You can advocate and encourage for reporting. Help them report it if they need help. Okay, change the culture. Okay, we are Americans now. We're here in America. You have fundamental rights here. You have the free will to be independent. And you need to make the effort to understand how America works and how the rules within America benefit you, benefit your community, and benefit everybody else. Okay, work within the parameters. The resources are already there, just nobody is using it. And of course, the result of all that was that our lack of reporting of incidents that occurred resulted in low statistics in comparison to the rest of the demographics in the United States, and in this case, also in the state of California. And I imagine this is also the same for the other states in the US. I'm pretty sure the statistical information is as low, considering how the Asian cultures are, as well as other cultures. We just don't want to report things, and that's been detrimental to us as a community, because now that there's an increase or a perceived increase in crimes against Asians, there's no statistics to back it up. Language barriers. Help translate for the people in your circles. And if that's not enough for you, or if you want to supplement that, the California Department of Justice has issued hate crimes brochures available in multiple different languages. But this is the California DOJ's website. For you to reference the pamphlets there, you can just go and download and distribute to your community if they want that information. But for you folks in other states, you can certainly use this information too, because even though these statutes may not necessarily represent your state, the information contained very much does, because it is still a hate crime. And the California brochure does kind of match, or at least their definition of hate crime basically matches the federal definition. But you can also seek those or similar resources from the federal side. I'm not sure if the FBI actually has multiple languages here, but at least you can use this California brochure to kind of help reference that. And continuing on, the lack of public education on the subject. Again, federal, state, and local government agencies have resources for you. Okay, nonprofit organizations. Asian Pacific American Gun Owners Association, APAGOA, which is the group that I did this presentation for originally. You can go to their website. And this is my buddy Rick Tran of All American Safety. His YouTube channel is basically, he presented firearms information in Vietnamese. He's trying to bridge that language barrier, and he did that by using YouTube. And Rick also goes to local temples and local Vietnamese churches to try to explain, or what realistically to expect when you call for service or call for help, basically dialing 911. And I think that's an excellent service that's provided to the local community. Like, I didn't know Rick was doing this, and I've known Rick for a few years now. So he's kind of like the unsung hero. He was just doing it out of the goodness of his heart. So, go to his pages and stuff like that, and I'll link them all below again. Okay, social media. So there are groups like the Asian American Gun Owners of California. That's a Facebook group. Plenty of folks there willing to help. The lack of community involvement or willingness to report. Change the attitude. You change the attitude. You lead by example. You take charge. If the community doesn't want to involve themselves, or they're unwilling to report, they're lethargic on the subject, you take charge. You do it for them. You be the change that you want to see. So change starts at the ground level and not at the legislative level. It starts with the community and the individual. So you be the change, you change the community, and let the community absorb this new culture. That is where change starts. It does not start at the legislative level. And what I mean by this is you notice that the definitions that I provided early on in the presentation, there are already statutes, there are already laws in place that prohibit crimes against persons, and they have hate crimes enhancements. So they're already in place. What does additional legislation do? So what should you do when a hate crime occurs? Victims of hate crimes are strongly encouraged to contact their local law enforcement agency immediately. So call 911, have somebody else contact 911 if you can't. Or if it's not a hot call, suspect's no longer in the vicinity, or you don't need immediate aid, then contact a non-emergency line for your local law enforcement agency, whether it be your county, your SO, sheriff's department, city police, or if you're not sure, just call 911. Usually the 911 operator will route you to the correct entity or where you need to go, or they can direct you to the place to go. Like in some locations in the state of California, depending on where you are, if you're calling from 911, it routes to CHP dispatch, and then the Highway Patrol's dispatch routes you to your local agency as needed, depending on what you're doing, depending on where you are, depending on if you're using a cell phone. Victims should also get medical attention if you need it. Write down the exact words that were said and other facts. What the suspect says can make the difference between a hate crime and not a hate crime. Okay, the difference between somebody robbing you and somebody robbing you saying, "Hey, give me that purse, you chink." That's the difference between hate crime and not hate crime. So you have to remember these things. Save all evidence that you can. In the case of vandalism, take pictures. Don't throw anything away. I know that you want to pick things up because you feel violated. You want to clean the place up, but don't. The evidence is there. And depending on the agency, they may pick up the evidence, like if it was like a beer bottle or a soda can or something they threw at you, there might be evidence on there. There might be DNA evidence that can help them. If you can't, take your pictures and then leave everything as is until somebody's on scene to do something. Sometimes agencies that are large enough, or they have the support, they have their own CSI teams come out and take pictures or record the evidence, collect evidence as needed. Now, caveat, the real life CSI does not work like the TV does. This is known as CSI effect, and I'll let you research that on your own, but it's basically the public's perception of how investigations are supposed to go based on Hollywood. If it is safe to do so, wait until law enforcement arrives so they can take photos of the evidence, correct, and you can take photos of evidence as well, okay? So try to get the names and contact information of other victims, of witnesses in the area. Do your best, especially if there are other victims and they've been attacked, especially if it's a physical attack. They may not be aware of what's going on. They might still be in shock. Just sit them down. Sit them down, just talk them through, okay? Because you both are victims at the same time. Or if you're a witness and you see a victim, help the victims because they're disoriented. They're not sure what's going on. Try to get a description of the criminal or the vehicle. This is probably the number one reason why nothing happens after a crime report. It's because there's a lack of description of the criminal or the vehicle. It is very important that you do the best you can to remember key demographic information or key characteristics for the criminal or the suspect's vehicle, if there is a vehicle. They can't catch a criminal if they don't have a description of the criminal. Outside assistance from government organizations, community outreach, or orgs, nonprofits in your area, they can provide you with assistance if you need it. Here's the official bulletin from the California Department of Justice. Here's the website below at the Office of Attorney General's website, and you can go there. Victims' rights. What is law enforcement required to provide to you as the victim? For those of you outside of the state of California, this one is definitely California specific, but understand that your state may have adopted similar victims' rights or have a codified victims' rights section. I implore you to go to your state's website or your Department of Justice, look this up to see if there's something that's codified. So the Victims' Bill of Rights in the state of California, and it's known as Marcy's Law. If you're not familiar with Marcy was Marceline Nicholas. She was 21 years old, a UC Santa Barbara student who was stalked and unfortunately killed by her ex-boyfriend in 1983. Approximately a week after the murder, Marcy's mother was confronted by the accused murderer. So basically the suspect was bailed out, and then he went to go confront the mother. So at the time, the courts did not have any obligation to let the family of the victim know what's going on with the suspect. Marcy's Law has changed this, and the courts now have to take into consideration the safety of the victim and the victim's family before they set bail or consider releasing the suspect on bail. And you can understand a little bit more about Marcy's Law here via this website. Some other states in the U.S. have also adopted Marcy's Law, and Marcy's Law is a national campaign. So not all states, to my knowledge, have done this yet, but many states have, and you can research Marcy's Law here. I believe they do have a map that shows you which states have adopted. The California Constitution in Article 1, subsection 28, section B, is where the Victims' Bill of Rights is located in the state of California Constitution. This is what is required by all law enforcement in the state of California to give to a victim of a crime. Anything else, such as domestic violence pamphlets or hate crimes pamphlets, those are all agency specific. So currently in the state of California, there are 17 codified victims' rights. Okay, I'm just going to note a few of them here. You as a victim have a right to be treated with fairness and respect for your privacy, your dignity, and your freedom from intimidation, harassment, and abuse throughout the entire criminal or juvenile justice process. The government cannot give your information to the suspect. Okay, I mean, that information is privy to certain individuals, and attorneys can get it if they subpoena for it, but understand that the suspect is not entitled to your information as the victim. You have a right to be reasonably protected from the defendant and persons acting on behalf of the defendant. So that ties back here. You have a right to be protected from harassment from like the suspect's family. You have a right to have your safety and your family's safety considered in the bail or release conditions for the suspect or the defendant. In this next slide, we have two different scenarios to essentially explain the difference between a hate incident and a hate crime. So the difference between a hate incident and a hate crime is a hate incident basically does contain some form of bias, but it is protected by the First Amendment or free speech, if you will. So in the United States, if you're not aware, we can say whatever we want, express ourselves however we want to, short of violating somebody else's right to safety or committing a crime. So that's the major difference. So a hate incident is noted here as an action or behavior motivated by hate, but legally protected by the First Amendment right or freedom of expression. If a hate incident starts to threaten a person or property, then it may be considered as a hate crime. So just like I explained earlier. The publication from the California Department of Justice also gives you a few examples of what a hate incident is. So a display of offensive material on one's own property, posting of hate material that does not necessarily result in property damage, or distribution of materials with hate messages in public places. So again, at the bottom here, you can find information from the Department of Justice, and if you need more resources, go ahead and go there. So the question boils down to, should you report a hate incident? Yes, you should. Documenting a hate incident through official channels creates a quote-unquote paper trail on the subject or on the incident should future incidents occur with that same subject. So an example of this is a suspect approaches an Asian person and says, "I hate you, chinks. I wish you would all go back to your country," then walks away. So what happens here in this scenario? The suspect did not commit a crime. He expressed himself through the First Amendment, free speech, and he can say what he wants so long as he does not commit a crime in the process. Okay, so in this case, all he stated was, "I hate you, chinks. I wish you will all go back to your country," and then walks away. He did not commit any crime. And then the same suspect later physically attacks another Asian person, but does not say anything to the victim. Is this considered as a hate crime? No. The suspect had committed a crime, but did not say anything associated with the Asian person or the demographic or the protected characteristic. So there was no bias identified in this specific incident. So this was a crime, it was a battery, but it was not considered as a hate crime because of this. A hate incident report can be the difference between identifying a hate crime or not. Okay, so let's say, for example, this person from the beginning didn't report this incident, but note that the same suspect here attacked the other Asian person. But because this first person didn't report it, not only did their incident not get recorded, but the second attack on the other person, on the other Asian person, was not constituted as a hate crime, but it was a battery. And currently right now, as of the time of this video, a lot of these misdemeanors or even low-level offenses are basically cite and release. Specifically in a lot of jurisdictions right now, because of what's going on with the world, and depending on the political realm of that specific jurisdiction, they may just not prosecute at all. So it's a revolving door of criminals coming in and out. But hate crimes are taken very seriously. When in doubt, report it, okay? If this first person had reported this hate incident and it was recorded and they had the suspect description, and then the second person was attacked, and let's say the suspect was found based on this description, and the investigation ended up linking this same suspect to the first incident. So now this suspect, who didn't say anything to the second victim they attacked, is now linked to the first incident, the hate incident, confirming that he stated, "I hate you chinks, I wish you would all go back to your country." Now they can link these two cases together and substantiate that the suspect had a bias against Asians and likely was the reason why he attacked the Asian person out of random. And now this total package can be considered as totality for a hate crime. And again, going back, that can be the difference between identifying a hate crime or not. So I can't stress how important it is for you to report all of these incidents, because it does make a difference. So remember, when in doubt, report the incident. So this page contains resources available to you. The FBI has hate crimes information on their website, as well as the link to the Universal Crime Report or UCR hate crime statistics, as well as other crime statistics should you want to look at that. In this site, you can not only look at the summary statistics, but also the individual data tables, meaning the actual raw data that was collected in a table format. So you can actually look at the demographics and the actual numbers provided by the 16,000 or so police agencies from that era. For California, the Office of the Attorney General, their website contains information on crime or assistance as you need as a victim. Open Justice is where the statistics are. This is the California version of the FBI UCR. So this is all reports and what is collected by law enforcement agencies. The California Victims' Rights, or Marsy's Law, is also located on the California Department of Justice's website. The Asian Pacific American Gun Owners Association, or APAGOA, this is a website here. You can go visit them. So you can always reach out to them for information, as well as if you need any type of training for firearms or any other resources, I'm sure they'll be happy to provide it for you. And my buddy Joey, aka 9mm Musashi, he's a great resource for information as far as firearms content and can provide you with a lot of good, valuable resources and other information outside also. Joey will be a guest on my channel if he's not already by the time of the posting of this video, but you can go visit him on his Instagram at 9mm.musashi. And Rick Tran, who's already been interviewed for my channel, All American Safety is his website. He's a trainer in California. So you can follow him on his Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at All American Safety. This information is out there. I understand that it's a departure from the usual firearms-based information, but I think that information like this is useful, especially considering the current times, as well as supporting my existing mission of providing information to the general public and hopefully influencing you all to become better versions of yourselves and ultimately make a better community and overall helping to make a better society for the rest of us. I find that education on America, our US Constitution, our local statutes, and how generally our government works will help everybody to basically learn to work around the system. The United States is a nation of laws. We're supposed to have our representatives, the people that we elect, represent the people, and they're supposed to make laws. Our legislators are supposed to make laws, and those laws are supposed to be representative of what the people want. Unfortunately, we don't see that to be the case as of late, especially in specific states, like in this case, the state of California, as well as some of the other states in the union. But I do feel that the way to combat that is through proper education via the local level, through grassroots organizations or through individuals such as the people that I've noted here, the organizations that I've listed here, to help us change the country for the better, for the future. Even though we may not necessarily be here when change does occur, it is still our responsibility. It's still incumbent upon us to be the change. It's still on us to guide each other our current generation, our respective peers, friends, and family. The previous generation, the older folks are still around that may not quite have adapted to the changes that are going on, or may not necessarily understand how the country works, as well as the subsequent generation, which is a mixture of folks who are just kind of in their own world, may be completely oblivious to how this country works as a result of the current education system. But, that's the point of what we're doing. We're supposed to mentor people. And I hope that this information helps to do that. If anything, if not me, you can do it. That's pretty much it for this video. Again, I'm Jesse. You all know me as Bunny Operator. Let me know if you have questions. Send me a message, comment below, share the video, help the algorithms out. I think this particular video and the resources here are very important, especially to the Asian community. That's all I got. Thank you for watching and listening to my long-winded rant. Stay tuned for the next video, as well as future content for information outside of firearms knowledge. Thank you all for watching. Bunny Operator signing out.